"What's your rank, soldier?" The Admiral's voice cut through the quiet hall, sharp as a blade and dripping with amusement. The room erupted in laughter. Every officer present joined in, except the man holding the mop. He paused mid-swipe, eyes lifting slowly toward the man in charge. For a heartbeat, the entire corridor seemed to hold its breath. "Major General," he replied, calm and certain. The laughter died instantly, as if the air itself had been stripped away. "Before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Veteran Story channel so you never miss these fascinating tales of courage. And let us know in the comments where you're watching today." The mop resumed its slow rhythm across the spotless tile, water gliding beneath its worn gray strands. The man guiding it, Thorne Callaway, moved with silent precision, the kind that came not from janitorial habit, but from years of tactical training buried under civilian disguise. Outside, the Virginia dawn hesitated below the horizon. Inside the Naval Special Warfare Command facility, fluorescent light bled across the corridors where polished metals gleamed in glass cases. Soon these halls would echo with bootsteps and orders, men of rank passing by without so much as seeing him. They never looked. That was the gift of invisibility. Thorne preferred it that way. In the quiet hours before sunrise, he belonged to no one. He didn't have to remember the sound of gunfire, the coded chatter of radios, or the faces of the men he couldn't save. Here he was just another maintenance worker with gray coveralls, Callaway stitched neatly above the heart. A door opened down the corridor. Commander Ellis appeared, his uniform immaculate, his boots still damp from morning dew. He stepped directly into the area Thorne had just cleaned, leaving muddy tracks like a careless insult. "Morning, sir," Thorne said, more out of habit than hope. Ellis didn't even glance up from his phone. He passed without acknowledgement, as though the man speaking didn't exist. Thorne's reflection in the polished floor stared back at him, gray hair trimmed close, tired eyes that gave away nothing. He'd long since mastered that expression, neither deferential nor defiant, simply unreadable. In the restroom, he worked methodically, checking each stall, refilling paper, scrubbing sinks. Laughter drifted in from the hallway before the door swung open. 3 young officers entered, still talking as if no one else occupied the space. "Blackwood's coming to clean house," one said with an arrogant grin. "He's not the kind of admiral who does courtesy inspections." "Promotion season," another added, fixing his collar in the mirror. "He notices everything." The 3rd officer finally looked at Thorne and smirked. "Guess our friend here better have extra bleach. Heard Blackwood makes people scrub toilets with toothbrushes if they fail inspection." Their laughter echoed as they left. When the door closed, Thorne faced the mirror they had just stood before. In the corner of the glass, someone had scratched a crude phrase, "Janitors, failed heroes." He stared at it for a long moment. No emotion crossed his face. Then with slow, deliberate strokes, he erased it until the surface gleamed again. By 0600, the building came alive. Voices barked commands, footsteps struck the tile in synchronized rhythm. Tension rippled through the air. Admiral Riker Blackwood was due for inspection, and every officer knew one misplaced fingerprint could end a career. Thorne moved quietly along the wall, pushing his cart past the command center. On the digital screen ahead, blinking markers tracked hostile movement near a forward base. "We need contingency plans now," Captain Reeves ordered, gesturing toward the map. As the officers debated strategies, Thorne continued his work, emptying bins, wiping surfaces, invisible amid the chaos. But when one officer argued for an airstrike, and another objected over diplomatic zones, Thorne's hand, almost unconsciously, adjusted the handle of his cart, pointing it toward a narrow valley on the western approach of the map. Captain Reeves paused mid-sentence, eyes flicking toward that same section. "What about the West Valley?" he said slowly. "It's outside the restricted zone and provides natural cover." The room fell silent as the officers processed the idea. No one noticed the janitor quietly leaving, with his empty trash bag. Only one person did, Lieutenant Adira Nasser, a sharp-eyed officer standing at the edge of the room. Her gaze followed Thorne as the doors shut behind him, her mind already turning. Something about the way he'd moved, the subtle precision in every action. It wasn't the rhythm of a cleaner. It was the rhythm of a soldier. Outside, Thorne continued down the hall, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, that his anonymity had just been cracked for the first time in 15 years. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the corridor, blending with the muffled rhythm of boots and clipped orders echoing from down the hall. By late morning, the Naval Special Warfare Command had transformed from sterile silence to a hive of rehearsed perfection, every officer striving to look indispensable. Before Admiral Blackwood's arrival, Thorne Callaway moved among them like a shadow, unseen yet present in every space. His cart rolled in smooth, unhurried motions, the faint squeak of its wheels marking the steady passage of a man who'd once moved through battlefields with that same quiet precision. Lieutenant Nasser appeared again near the display hall, clipboard in hand. Her gaze locked on him with professional curiosity rather than superiority, a subtle difference Thorne had learned to read long ago. "Mr. Callaway, isn't it?" she asked, eyes flicking to his name tag. "Yes, ma'am." "You showed impressive awareness in the command center earlier," she remarked. "Not many would have caught that West Valley route." His hand stilled on the glass he was polishing. "Just cleaning around the important work, ma'am." "You angled your cart like a field commander marking terrain," she countered, crossing her arms. Thorne's voice was mild, practiced. "Didn't notice. Guess old habits die hard?" "Old habits," she repeated, studying him. "You know, I once served under a Commander Callaway. Any relation?" He turned back to the display, deliberately facing away. "Common name, ma'am." "Not that common," she murmured. "He had a gift for spatial awareness, the kind that wins missions." Thorne kept cleaning. He could feel her gaze like a weight between his shoulder blades, but his reflection betrayed nothing. "Funny thing," she continued softly. "That commander disappeared from all service records 15 years ago. No retirement notice, no obituary, just gone." "Military bureaucracy," Thorne said evenly, closing the case he'd been wiping. "Things get lost. People don't," Nasser replied. "Not people like that." Their eyes met briefly, hers probing, his unreadable. "Was there something you needed help with, Lieutenant?" A pause, then she straightened. "No, not right now. Thank you, Mr. Callaway." When she walked away, Thorne exhaled slowly. The muscles in his shoulders tightened beneath the gray uniform. She was getting too close. Questions like hers never stayed buried for long. That evening, the Virginia sky darkened to indigo by the time Thorne reached his small apartment building 3 blocks away. His pace was slower now, each step heavy with exhaustion, the kind that came not from labor but from restraint. Inside, a warm yellow light spilled from the kitchen. His son sat at the table surrounded by textbooks, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Evening, Emery," Thorne said, setting down his keys. "Hey, Dad," the boy answered without looking up. His voice carried the distracted calm of someone deeply absorbed in complex ideas. "I'm working on the quantum mechanics assignment." Thorne smiled faintly. "When I was your age, I couldn't even spell quantum." Emery grinned without glancing up. "Mrs. Lenworth thinks I should apply for the MIT summer program." "Sounds like a good plan." Thorne's tone softened. "You'll get in." Emery shifted, pulling a separate folder closer. "There's this other project, too, for Veterans Day. It's about family military history. Mrs. Lenworth wants to feature families with service traditions." Thorne's hands paused halfway to the refrigerator. "Tell her we don't have any." "Everyone has something," Emery persisted. Even Zane's dad wrote about his grandfather being a conscientious objector. "Not everyone," Thorne said quietly. Dinner passed in a rhythm of simple conversation, grades, competitions, scholarship forms. To Emery it was ordinary talk. To Thorne it was camouflage, a shield built from small, safe topics. Later, when Emery retreated to his room, Thorne stayed behind to wash dishes. He liked the sound of running water, predictable, controlled. The world outside his apartment was full of things he couldn't control anymore. A few minutes later, he noticed movement at the edge of the hall. Emery stood in the doorway, holding something in his hand. "A photo frame, Dad," he said softly. "What's this?" Thorne froze. The frame was one he'd hidden at the back of his drawer. An old photograph of him in uniform, younger, prouder, standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Catherine. "Some doors stay closed." "Son," Thorne said finally, his voice low, "to keep what's inside safe." Emery hesitated, then returned to the photo. "Sorry, I was just looking for a calculator." "Top drawer," Thorne replied. Always in the same place. That night, Thorne stood in front of his bathroom mirror, unbuttoning his shirt. Scars traced pale paths across his chest and ribs, the map of a life that refused to stay hidden. Underneath the hard lines of age still lived the disciplined strength of a soldier, buried but not gone. His fingers brushed the long scar on his side, and the memories surged back. Gunfire, radio static, the metallic taste of blood. A helicopter spinning out of control. A voice screaming his name through the smoke. He shut his eyes, forcing the ghosts back down. Then he slipped into a plain t-shirt, washed his hands, and returned to the kitchen. From a locked tin box high above the cabinet, he took out a worn leather journal. Inside, taped to the first page, was a yellowed newspaper clipping. Naval Commander decorated for heroism. Operation Hermes Fall. The photo beneath showed a younger Thorne Callaway receiving a medal. 2 months later, another headline appeared beside it. Naval officer's wife killed in car accident and foul play suspected. Thorne stared at the headlines until his vision blurred. Then he closed the book and placed it back in its hiding place. Some histories, he thought, were meant to stay buried, especially the kind that could destroy the only person left who still believed in you. The next morning arrived with the crisp discipline of military timing. 500. The facility buzzed with restrained panic as officers rehearsed checklists and maintenance crews scrubbed surfaces until reflections gleamed like mirrors. Admiral Riker Blackwood's inspection was less than 24 hours away. And everyone understood what that meant. Promotions, demotions, reputations rewritten overnight. Thorne Callaway had seen this brand of fear before. The kind that turned seasoned officers into schoolchildren desperate for approval. As he mopped the East Corridor for the third time, he caught glimpses of faces tight with exhaustion and ambition. They've forgotten what service means, he thought. They're fighting for careers, not missions. Callaway! Commander Ellis's voice broke the morning silence. He approached with the self-importance of a man who enjoyed having someone to scold. This display case isn't acceptable. You see that smudge? Thorne turned calmly. The mark was barely visible, a phantom fingerprint on otherwise perfect glass. Yes, sir, Thorne replied, already reaching for his cloth. Blackwood will notice, Ellis barked. If this inspection goes poorly, it reflects on me. Do you understand what's at stake here? Yes, sir, Thorne said again evenly. Careers are made or broken tomorrow. Thorne's lips twitched in a hint of irony. Careers made and broken indeed. As Ellis marched off, Lieutenant Nasser appeared at the end of the corridor. She'd overheard. Commander Ellis is feeling the pressure, she said, keeping her tone casual. Seems contagious, Thorne replied, wringing out his cloth. Nasser leaned against the wall, studying him. Word is Admiral Blackwood built his entire career on a single operation, 15 years ago. Task Force Hermes, hostage extraction under impossible odds. Thorne's hand slowed briefly, then resumed its motion. History isn't really my thing, ma'am. The commander who led the ground team vanished soon after, she continued. Some say he died. Others say he walked away when Blackwood took credit for his work. Thorne turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Sounds complicated. It was, Nasser said softly. The file's been scrubbed. Redactions everywhere, almost like someone wanted him erased. Before Thorne could reply, commotion erupted near the facility's entrance. A voice shouted orders. Blackwood's advance team had arrived a full day early. Officers scattered like startled birds. Nasser glanced toward the chaos, then back at Thorne. Looks like you'll have a busy day, Mr. Callaway. He nodded once. Always am, ma'am. By noon, the corridors vibrated with tension. Thorne moved through the storm unnoticed, a ghost with a mop. When an aide tripped and spilled classified files across the floor, Thorne instinctively bent to help. One folder slid toward him, label partially visible. Operation Hermes Fall. Classified for a fraction of a second, his hand froze. His heart seemed to forget how to beat. Then, with practiced calm, he gathered the papers and handed them back. Thank you, the aide said, not noticing the tremor in the janitor's movements. From down the hall, Lieutenant Nasser observed. Her eyes narrowed. She'd caught that hesitation. Thorne returned to his duties, but inside, the past had already begun to stir. Hermes Fall, the mission that had ended his career, his marriage, and nearly his life. The operation that made Blackwood a hero and left Thorne Callaway a ghost. That evening, as most officers departed, Thorne remained. The building was quiet again, the way he preferred it. He polished the glass of the display case holding medals of honor, awards that once might have included his own. Behind him, footsteps echoed. "You're here late," Nasser said. "Big day tomorrow," Thorne replied, eyes fixed on the shining metal. "You handle those artifacts like they're regulation inspected," she observed. "Perfect spacing, measured alignment. That's not something maintenance staff usually know," Thorne shrugged. "Learn by watching. Your file says you've worked here 8 years," she continued. "Before that, scattered contracts, no military record. Yet you stand like someone who's been saluted before." He didn't answer. Silence stretched between them until Nasser smiled faintly. "Stars," she said. Interesting word choice for someone without service background. Thorne met her eyes for a heartbeat too long. "Some patterns become habit, Lieutenant." Her expression softened, but curiosity burned brighter behind it. "See you at inspection tomorrow, Mr. Callaway." After she left, he stood motionless for a long time, surrounded by the ghosts of medals and memories. He'd been invisible for 15 years, but tomorrow everything might change. When he finally stepped into the night air, fatigue pulled at his limbs. The walk home felt longer than usual. In his apartment, he found Emery asleep over open textbooks again. A military history book lay among them, open to a page on Navy SEAL operations. Thorne's chest tightened. Even irony has a sense of humor. His son was searching for a family hero for a school project, while the real one was sweeping corridors under an assumed name. He carried the boy to bed, tucking him under the blanket. "You'll get into MIT," he murmured, "and maybe someday you'll never need to know why your father stopped being a soldier." But as Thorne stood in the darkened kitchen, staring out the window at the rain-soaked street, a vibration from his phone shattered the fragile stillness. A text from an unknown number. "Hermes rises at dawn. Blackwood knows." The screen went dark again. Thorne deleted the message without hesitation, but his pulse thundered in his ears. 15 years of hiding on and done in 6 words, he whispered to himself almost like a prayer. After all this time, the war's found me again. Across the city, in a penthouse suite overlooking the quiet lights of Norfolk Harbor, Admiral Riker Blackwood sat before a laptop, the cold glow of the screen reflecting off the medals pinned neatly to his dress coat. The file before him played silently, grainy security footage from the Naval Special Warfare Command facility. A janitor moved methodically through the corridors, face half obscured by shadow. But the moment Blackwood paused the video and zoomed in, the faint lines of recognition flickered across his features. "Callaway," he whispered, disbelief twisting into dread. "You're supposed to be dead." He reached for his secure phone, punching in a number with trembling precision. "Find me everything on the maintenance worker at the facility. Name's Callaway," he ordered. "I want full background employment records cross-reference with Operation Hermes Fall." "Sir," came the hesitant reply. "Those files are sealed under presidential authority." "Then break the seal," Blackwood hissed. "I don't care if you have to drag them out of the Pentagon basement. I want them tonight." When the call ended, Blackwood sat back, pulse hammering beneath the crisp white collar of his uniform. The maintenance worker on that footage wasn't just an employee. He was Major General Thorne Callaway, the man Blackwood had buried in redacted reports, the man whose tactical brilliance had made Blackwood's career possible. And if Callaway was alive, then the lie Blackwood had built his entire reputation on was about to unravel. At the facility, the following morning arrived with military precision. Thorne's alarm chirped once before he silenced it. He rose instantly, mind already alert. Old habits, he thought. They never die. Just wait to be called again. In the kitchen, Emery was already awake, his expression serious as he flipped through pages of notes. "Big physics test today," he said, then hesitated. "And I still need that family history project." Thorne poured coffee with mechanical calm. "We've talked about that." Emery unfolded a newspaper clipping. "I found something. Mom's obituary. It says you were a decorated officer. A commander." Thorne's hands froze mid-motion. The paper might as well have been a detonator. "It's a mistake," he said finally. "I checked military archives," Emery pressed. "There's a weird gap around your name, like someone erased it." Thorne set the mug down gently in front of him. "Some history isn't meant to be researched." "Why?" Emery demanded. "What could be so dangerous about the truth?" Thorne met his son's eyes, voice quiet but iron hard. "Because knowing it could get you killed. Before Emery could speak again, Thorne's phone vibrated with an automated alert. Inspection moved to 0700. All personnel report immediately. We'll talk tonight, Thorne promised, grabbing his jacket. After the inspection, Emery said. You'll tell me the truth then? Thorne paused at the door, his silhouette sharp against the morning light. I've never lied to you, son, he said softly. I've just kept you safe. The naval facility was a controlled storm when Thorne arrived. Clipped voices, polished shoes, the smell of disinfectant and tension. Captain Hargrove intercepted him before he could reach his station. Callaway, East Wing conference rooms. Blackwood's team says they're below standard. Make them perfect. Yes, sir, Thorne replied. And Callaway, Hargrove added. The Admiral's already found fault with 3 departments. Don't be the 4th. The East Wing hummed with officers arranging presentation screens and security binders. Lieutenant Nasser was there, her expression unreadable as Thorne entered. Perfect timing, Mr. Callaway, she said briskly. We've got 20 minutes to make this place immaculate. He nodded, assessing the room's layout in a single glance. The symmetry of the furniture, the smudge near the window, the reflection angle of the display lights. His movements were efficient, quiet, almost too precise for a civilian janitor. You sleep well? Nasser asked without looking up. Well enough, ma'am. I didn't, she said. Spent most of the night reading redacted reports. Thorne's hand never stopped moving. That sounds intense. It was, she replied evenly. I was researching something called Operation Hermes. Fall. The words hung in the air like a blade. Thorne didn't react, but his silence spoke volumes. Funny thing about military files, she continued. What's missing often says more than what's there. The ground commander's name, for example, completely erased. Every reference, every citation. It's like someone tried to erase a person from history. Thorne turned to the window, wiping it in small measured circles. Sounds like that's above my pay grade, Lieutenant. The commander's wife was killed shortly after, Nasser pressed. Car accident. Foul play suspected. Her name was Thorne Callaway. The cloth stopped mid-swipe. Just for a second. Before either could speak again, Commander Ellis burst into the room, his voice cutting through the tension. Lieutenant Nasser, the Admiral's motorcade is approaching. Are we ready? Yes, sir, she said, stepping back. Ellis's gaze swept over the spotless room before landing on Thorne. Why is maintenance still here? Get him out before the Admiral arrives. Sir, he hasn't finished. Out, Ellis barked. Thorne gathered his supplies in silence. Yes, sir. As he reached the door, Ellis added with a smirk. And Callaway, make sure the restrooms are immaculate. That's more your appropriate battlefield. The insult landed, but Thorne didn't flinch. He'd endured far worse. His only reply was a quiet, understood. In the corridor, he paused by the window, watching as black SUVs rolled through the security gate. The sun glinted off their windshields like the flash of a rifle scope. Time's up, he thought. 15 years of quiet, over in one morning. He entered the executive restroom, methodically scrubbing each surface, though his mind was miles away. His reflection stared back at him. The carefully stooped posture, the faded uniform, the mask of insignificance. For a moment he straightened. Shoulders squared, jaw lifted. The transformation was immediate. The janitor vanished, replaced by the presence of command. Calm, unyielding, dangerous. Then the door creaked open. A young lieutenant stepped in, glanced at him without recognition, and left again. As the door closed, Thorne's phone buzzed once more. A message, Blackwood asking about you specifically. Be careful. He deleted it instantly. The confirmation hit like a gunshot. Blackwood knew. The public address system crackled overhead. Admiral Blackwood's inspection tour now proceeding to the command center. All department heads report for review. Thorne gripped the mop handle like the stock of a rifle, then exhaled slowly. He'd planned for this moment for years, but not like this. Not with his son still unaware. Not with ghosts stirring beneath every surface of the life he'd built. When he stepped into the corridor, Lieutenant Nasser was waiting. Mr. Callaway, she said, her voice steady but her eyes alert. Your presence is requested in the command center during the inspection. Thorne blinked. Mine, ma'am. Admiral-specific request, she confirmed. Understanding hit him cold. This wasn't random. Blackwood was orchestrating a confrontation. Of course, ma'am, he said, his tone even. Wouldn't want to keep the Admiral waiting. As they walked toward the command center, the echo of their footsteps sounded almost ceremonial, a prelude to something inevitable. For 15 years, Major General Thorne Callaway had lived as a ghost. Today, the ghost was being summoned back into the light. The command center glowed under a web of screens and shifting light, digital maps flickering across the glass walls like reflections of a living storm. Every officer stood at rigid attention as Admiral Riker Blackwood entered. Crisp uniform, silver hair, metals catching the light like fire. His presence drew the air out of the room. Behind him, 2 aides flanked the door, recording every movement. And in the far corner, almost invisible among the uniforms, stood Thorne Callaway, gray coveralls, mop bucket, eyes lowered. Blackwood's gaze swept the room once. "Assessing, gentlemen," he said, his tone razor-sharp. "This inspection is not a formality. It is a measure of whether this command still deserves its name." He moved slowly, each step echoing with calculated weight. Officers held their breath as he checked data screens, storage seals, even the alignment of chairs. Then suddenly he stopped. At Thorne. The Admiral tilted his head, his voice deceptively casual. "And you," he said, gesturing toward the man with the mop. "You're the janitor, yes? What's your rank, soldier?" The words, the same words from 15 years ago, hit like a bullet wrapped in memory. The room shifted, confused, officers glancing between the 2 men. Thorne straightened slowly. The mop remained in his hand, but his eyes, calm and steady, met the Admiral's without hesitation. "Major General," he said evenly. A wave of stunned silence rippled through the room. For a moment no one breathed. Blackwood's jaw clenched, his carefully polished composure cracking ever so slightly. "Excuse me?" he said coldly. Thorne took a slow step forward. "Major General Thorne Callaway, United States Navy. Task Force Hermes." Whispers erupted among the officers. The name whispered in legend. The man thought dead. Blackwood forced a smile, brittle and sharp. "That's impossible. Major General Callaway died in service nearly 15 years ago." "Declared dead," Thorne corrected quietly. "Conveniently, right after Hermes' fall." Lieutenant Nasser's eyes darted between them, realization dawning like sunlight through fog. "Sir," she said carefully, "if this is true, there should be—" "Silence, Lieutenant," Blackwood snapped, but his voice betrayed panic beneath command. Thorne advanced 1 measured step. "You took my mission, my men, and my wife. And then you took my name. You built your empire on the corpses you left behind. Watch your tone," Blackwood hissed, though his hand trembled slightly at his side. "I watched my team die while you called for extraction that never came," Thorne said, his voice steady, low, carrying through the room like thunder muffled by restraint. "You left us there because a failed rescue meant no promotion. And when I crawled out alive, you erased me." Gasps broke the silence and the shock, disbelief, fear. Nasser stepped forward. "Sir, we should verify—" "Enough," Blackwood roared. "You expect anyone to believe a janitor's delusion?" Thorne reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn flash drive, its casing dented and scarred. "I made copies," he said simply. "Mission logs, radio transcripts, casualty reports. The world may have forgotten Hermes' fall. I didn't." For the first time, Admiral Blackwood looked genuinely afraid. Nasser's voice was quiet but unyielding. "Sir, for the integrity of command, we have to investigate this." Blackwood's composure fractured. "You have no authority to—" "Actually, I do," she cut him off, holding up her credentials. "Internal Affairs assigned me 2 weeks ago. Your inspection wasn't the only one happening today." The silence that followed was absolute. Thorne didn't move, didn't smile. He simply watched as officers stepped back from the Admiral. As realization swept the room, the war hero they'd admired was nothing but a thief in metals. When security arrived, Blackwood's voice broke through the air one last time. "You think anyone will believe you, Callaway? You disappeared. You're a ghost." Thorne's gaze was calm, unwavering. "Ghosts don't disappear," he said quietly. "They haunt." The Admiral was escorted out, his protest echoing down the corridor like a dying command. Hours later, the facility was silent again. The inspection canceled, the halls empty. Thorne stood alone in the same corridor where he'd once mopped floors in anonymity. The silence felt different now, heavier, freer. Lieutenant Nasser approached, holding a small envelope. "The department wants your statement," she said softly. They'll reopen Hermes Fall, Thorne nodded. Took them 15 years, she hesitated. What will you do now? He looked down at his hands, the faint scars catching the light. Go home. Tell my son who his father really was. A faint smile touched Nasser's lips. He'll be proud. Thorne shook his head gently. He'll be angry first. Then maybe, someday proud. She extended her hand. For what it's worth, sirs, it's been an honor. Thorne clasped her hand firmly. The honor's mutual, Lieutenant. Outside, dawn broke over the base and soft gold spilling across steel and glass. Thorne walked out into the morning light, every step carrying 15 years of buried truth. The wind off the harbor smelled like salt and redemption. He stopped once, turning back toward the facility that had been both his prison and his hiding place. Then he whispered, barely audible, for Catherine, for my team, for the ghosts. As he disappeared into the brightness, the first notes of the Star-Spangled Banner drifted faintly from a distant loudspeaker, and for the first time in years, Thorne Callaway stood tall again, not as a janitor, not as a fugitive, but as a soldier whose story had finally been heard.